Welcome back to the Training Babble podcast. I'm your host, Dave Schell, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Alex Larson. Alex is a registered dietitian out of Minnesota, and today we are going to talk about healthy weight loss for endurance athletes. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on because this is something I feel like I really deal with this time of year. A lot of my athletes start wanting to cut weight, and we're always talking about the most healthy ways to do it and stuff like that. And if I'm honest, I don't know, I'm pretty well read, but at the same time, it's like I don't feel confident giving them too much guidance in this area. And so I love having an expert on that can kind of help with that. Before we get into that, can you just tell my listeners a little bit more about you that if they're not familiar with you?
Yeah. Well, I hail from Minnesota, like northern Minnesota, snowy right now, and very cold, just by Duluth. So if you're familiar with like Grandma's Marathon, I'm very close to like that race. It's like the signature race of our area. So I've lived and grew up here. I've been a dietitian for 14 years, and I've been an endurance athlete probably around the same time because I did my very first triathlon about the summer before I became a dietitian. I did a sprint triathlon here locally. I doggy paddled the swim. I rode this like $600 hybrid bike and like just barely got through that 5K run. But I was hooked at that point. And then when I started my career, I moved to this town. I knew zero people in this like little city of Winona, Minnesota. I started my first job as a dietitian, and they happened to have a really well-known triathlon called Trinona there. And so I was like, well, I've done a triathlon. And so I signed up for that race. And then next thing I know, with about 4 years later, I was doing Ironman Wisconsin. And when I crossed the finish line of that race, it was kind of like the spark of where I kind of felt my calling of, I think I need to help my people. I need to help them with their nutrition because it really can be such a crucial role in people's success in their training and then also in their racing and keeping them healthy and strong. And so that's what kind of led me to starting Alex Larson Nutrition. I went full-time in my business in 2021, and I now have actually a team of dietitians. I have two other Minnesota dietitians that also work with me who are also endurance athletes. Nice. And it's an understatement when I say that we are obsessed with our job. Like we love what we do so much because we know just how rewarding it is to actually like see yourself get like performance gains from your training. And when we can optimize nutrition, we can really enhance that. And like one of my favorite wins is like with our cycling clients when they're like, I am keeping up with the fast guys now. And I'm like, oh, I know what that feeling is. And it's such a good one. Or like when a parent is exhausted all the time and they have to like take a nap during the day on the weekend after their long run. Well, if we can optimize nutrition, they actually have like really great energy the rest of the day. They feel like they're a better parent. They're a happier person. Like I just love the value that we can help provide these athletes in not just improving their performance, but also just their quality of life as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that's often overlooked, and people are spending all this money on new bikes and everything else. And then it's like winning in the kitchen can be such like an easy win, but it's often overlooked. And so I'm excited to talk about it. And I think for me, I coach a lot of ultra endurance athletes. So very similar to Ironman, where they're doing 5+ hour rides. And nutrition comes down, like it's such a big piece of it because it's like you might be able to get away with a lot for up to 3 to 5 hours, but after that, it's like that house of cards kind of comes crashing down if you don't have it kind of dialed. You know?
Yeah, it can make or break your like so many aspects of your life. And just like for myself, yesterday I had a really hard ride. I'm got my bike set up on a trainer. I'm an aspiring gravel cyclist. I'm going to give gravel racing a try next summer. And I was probably 10, 15 minutes into the ride, and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to go so well. And so then I happened to have like quite a few gels like in my bento box. So I just took them all. I was like, I need every bit of help I can get. And honestly, by the last set, I felt great. I was like, okay, this ride actually isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, but those carbs definitely saved my butt. And so, it's been kind of fun myself returning back to, training, like regular training again, because now I really get to put everything that I teach into practice for myself.
Yeah. And so I think talking about your experience yesterday is a great place to start talking about this kind of weight loss, because I think it was really popular a few years ago, but it's still kind of sticking around. And I think a lot of times what athletes want to do, where they want to go when they're trying to lose weight, is doing fasted training. And so this time of year, they're riding the trainer a lot. And so their idea is like, oh, I'll just cut calories by getting up, getting straight on the trainer and not eating anything. And yeah, I mean, just in my own experience, it's pretty horrible. But I mean, like, how do you feel? Like, is that a great way to approach weight loss?
That would be the last way I would ever approach like weight loss for athletes, because for so many reasons. I mean, our training is already so stressful, right? Like it's stress on the body. And then when you're trying to do it with like minimal fuel, like you're just really like mentally and physically putting a lot of stress on yourself. And it is miserable to do a workout and suffer the whole time. Like it doesn't really make training that enjoyable, and it doesn't make you want to continue doing it. So there's so many different reasons of why I think athletes should not do workouts fasted. And really based on the research, it's not a good way to effectively improve body composition, because you're going to see a lot of muscle breakdown from doing that, because your body is going to be breaking down those amino acids pretty quickly to use as energy, because it doesn't have anything else to go from. I mean, yes, it can use fat as energy, and it will, but that's such a slow source of energy. That muscle breakdown is actually a little bit quicker. So when we look at body composition with our athletes, like if they come to us and they say they want to lose weight, I'm like, no, what you mean is you want to lose that excess body fat, but you want to keep the muscle. You want to build strength. And we have to do that by fueling your workouts really, really well. We need to optimize protein. We need to be very strategic with your nutrition so that we can see those body comp improvements, but you're not going to see your performance tank.
So I think that's such an important point that you just brought up. And so I guess let's kind of like go back and let's talk about when somebody comes to you and let's say they're in their base season, their first race is going to be in June or something like that, and they want to lose weight. Probably the first thing you say is like, rather than focusing on losing weight, let's focus on body composition. And so I guess first let's talk about that. Like why is that important? And then two, like what are the first things the first steps you tell people to take?
Yeah, well, we're going to start with like them coming to me and saying they want to lose weight. And I'm like, all right, like, let's talk about how much weight do you want to lose? And I'm like, we're going to clarify, we want to lose the excess body weight. They obviously don't want to get weaker. You know what I mean? They want to stay strong. They want their workouts to feel well, because usually they've tried to lose weight in the past. And when they do that, their energy levels tank. They feel a ton of fatigue. They're not able to complete their workouts. And so they get really frustrated, because they feel like they can't do both, right? Or the other thing that happens is they get like ferociously hungry, and they can only go so long before they're just like their willpower just gives out and they're eating everything in their kitchen, and then they're feeling this guilt and this kind of like roller coaster of emotions. So that's where I kind of want to get a little bit of history of what things have they tried, what have they done before. I want to make sure they're in a good like mental space in terms of like, okay, what's your weight loss goal? What's your body count goal? What's your timeline? Do you like, I usually like it when they say, I want to build like sustainable habits. Like, I don't want to do like a quick fix crash diet. Yeah. They are looking for like an actual improvement in like their food behaviors and their eating habits. And then usually knowing that we're kind of aligned at the same spot, I'm like, okay, yes, we will take you on as a client and we will help you work on this. And what's nice about doing it in the off season is we can really prioritize that body comp changes and not have, we want to still support them seeing fitness gains, but if they're in like peak Ironman training, it's like really not an opportunity, like a great time to like work on like weight loss during that. So that's kind of where I like to get started. And then we treat body comp changes from a case-to-case basis. Like, yes, we see overall trends in things that we work on with them, but we very much want to provide as personalized advice as possible because everyone's lifestyle and schedule and food preferences and cooking skills and health history is a little bit different. So we want to go about creating an eating pattern for them that works really well for them. It's something that they enjoy and it's something that's easy for them to maintain beyond working with us. Yeah. So we often will have them, we do use a food journal as a tool. It's a great learning tool for them, but it's also really helpful for us to be able to provide more personalized advice. And so looking at, okay, here's how you're currently eating. Here's where we would like your nutrition to be in order for us to start working on your goals. And so we will look at like low hanging fruit. What are some of the simplest, easiest changes they can make in their day-to-day eating habits that will help us start trending in the right direction? So the most common areas that we usually start is with protein. A lot of athletes just aren't quite getting enough. So we usually will look at their day and say, okay, where are we seeing the biggest gap? A lot of times it's in the morning at breakfast time, because we're usually rushing to either get kids out the door for school, get ourselves to work, or starting our, whatever it is we've got for the day. And so breakfast is often an area where we see the biggest room for improvement. Yeah. And there's something magical about breakfast. Like it is such a incredible meal because it really can set you up nicely for the rest of the day, can help regulate your hunger levels, give you really good energy. And so whether you work out in the morning or in the afternoon or midday, it's really nice to start your day off with a good protein-rich breakfast because it just does really great things for athletes.
And so I'm somebody that works out in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so my typical thing, like if I know I'm going to do a hard workout, I'll try to eat some oatmeal about an hour before.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to be an easier workout, then I might not like eat anything before, but then I'll have like scratch or something on the butt, keep, and then eat afterwards. So what would be your advice for somebody that like for a lot of people are working out first thing in the morning. Yeah. And so how would they tackle that?
Yeah, depending on what time, if you're getting up, if you're like a 4:35 a.m.er, like you're probably not going to want to wake up extra early to have like a little breakfast beforehand. So often I will just tell athletes, I'm like, well, as soon as you get up, if you can have some sort of easy carbs, whether it's like a granola bar or some applesauce or graham crackers or throwing some scratch or Tailwind or some sort of hydration mix in a bottle and drinking that before you get started. Just something to get as quick as possible some fresh energy going through your bloodstream can be a really nice way to start out the morning. For me, when I do that, I usually have to have just a little bit of protein in there. Sometimes if I have just straight sugar, my blood sugar rises a little too quickly and I feel a little ill. So I'll either have like a cheese stick or some yogurt or something that's got just a little bit of protein in there to just kind of stabilize that blood sugar so that I can get on the bike or go for my run and not feel like ill the first 10 minutes. And then depending on the workout, how long it is, you might have to take in fuel during. If you're kind of working on building that habit of taking fuel during a workout, or you're just kind of working on training your gut to tolerate that kind of stuff, it's not a bad idea to take some carbs during. And then post-workout, that's where you really can hone in on a good protein-rich breakfast. So it'll really kickstart recovery from your morning workout. Because I always think of any other time the rest of the day that you're eating as recovery nutrition, because as endurance athletes, we're usually training most days of the week. We really need to try and recover as quickly as possible so then our body can get ready for the next workout. And so you see like yourself nailing workout after workout throughout the entire week. And then when you get to your long workouts on the weekend, you're still feeling pretty good. You're not like struggling with muscle fatigue and trying to get through your long workouts. So that's where that breakfast afterwards can be just a game changer for a lot of athletes because they recover and bounce back so much faster.
And so you had mentioned protein, and that's certainly, like, I've worked with a dietitian in the past, and that was something like, it is, from my experience, it's hard to get enough protein.
Hard. Yeah.
And like, I think the recommendations are like 20 to 30 grams every 3 to 4 hours. And so for me, I think it's like 120 grams for my body size or something like that. And it's
anywhere from like 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is usually where we're looking at. And so, it takes a lot of initial intention and planning to get enough protein. But honestly, if you stick with it over a few months, it does get easier. Like I was on my own little like body composition journey because I'm about 15 months like postpartum from my third baby, my third and final. And so I was like, okay, I need to get it on top of my own nutrition. And so it took me like probably 3-4 months before this little bit higher protein diet that I've been on has actually felt much more routine and easy. So you have to kind of go through that zone of suck where it feels like a lot of work. But the more you practice it, honestly, it does feel a little bit better.
And so what are your tips for athletes, like trying to find other, like I personally am not like, I don't eat a lot of meat necessarily. And so just trying to find like other sources of protein and stuff, like what would you recommend that's especially in the morning?
Yeah. I would go with like Greek yogurt, or I really like Fairlife milk is like a higher protein milk. It's got like 13 grams of protein per cup versus regular milk would have 8. Some of the plant-based milk will have less than that. So any way that you could sneak in some extra protein that way would be really great. Obviously eggs in the morning are always a go-to, but they can get really boring. So dressing them up with like throwing them in a wrap, maybe like doing like a breakfast burrito. Sometimes even for my athletes that really struggle at breakfast, I'm like, okay, if nothing else sounds good or you're not able to do anything else, let's at least do a protein shake. Like it takes 2-3 minutes to whip up a protein shake, and at least we can getting something in just to build that habit of getting in something. And then we can start to expand to some actual foods that you might actually enjoy. And I had one runner this summer who she just didn't like breakfast foods at all. Which like breakfast foods are my favorite foods in the whole world. So I was like, I can't relate to this, but she would do like just regular like lunch, dinner foods at breakfast. Like she'd have like spaghetti and meatballs, or like, like she'd have just regular food in the morning, and that worked really well for her. Yeah. And during her training for Chicago Marathon, she ended up losing like 11 pounds, like slow and steady, like 1 pound a week, 1 pound every 2 weeks. It was pretty slow, but that's when we know that's going to be mainly body fat, when we see that nice, slow, steady weight loss. If it's a quick weight loss, it's like, you're not losing body fat this quick. So that was kind of what we like to see, especially when you're in a marathon training block like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about what are some of the common mistakes you see, or I guess overall, like what is when you're trying to change, when you're trying to lose weight, when you're trying to change body composition, what are your recommendations? I mean, I think most people where they go is like counting calories, using a calorie tracker, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly can do that, but I think sometimes people get this idea of like, oh, I'm going to try and get as low as possible. And there is a point where it becomes really harmful to cut calories too much. So even just a slight calorie deficit can encourage body count changes without seeing like, the major consequences that we see from athletes that are in more of a low energy availability setting. So a couple things that I recommend to athletes often is front loading your nutrition. So I talked about breakfast, right? So having a really solid big breakfast is very important, but same thing at lunch. Like I see a lot of athletes that try and diet during the day, and then they'll get to the evening when they're tired and exhausted and starving at that point because they're at such a massive deficit that they end up just binging in the evening. And they're like, oh, I have this wicked sweet tooth in the evening. And I'm like, okay, we're going to fix that like right away. Because once we start front loading nutrition, it's amazing how in the evening they're just satisfied. They're like content. They're they're like, I had one triathlete a couple years ago who the first call we had, he's like, I have a wicked sweet tooth, Alex. He goes, there's a box of Krispy Kreme donuts on my counter. He goes, they are not safe. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. Like, we'll work through that. And so after about like 3-4 weeks, he was at like probably an 800 to 1,000 calorie deficit most days. So we worked him up, his calories back up more to a maintenance level. And he goes, Alex, I have had some cookies on my counter for days and I have not felt the need to touch them. He's like, who am I? I was like, you are a well-fueled triathlete. That is what you are. And so, and he was like losing weight. He's like, what? I'm eating more than ever and I'm losing weight. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of funny how that works, isn't it? And so, that's kind of one of my favorite things to happen for people as they start to realize that like that heavily restrictive mindset can actually do more harm than it can good. And when we start to optimize nutrition, their body gets into a really happy, non-stressed state, and it makes that body comp change so much easier.
And so you'd mentioned with this particular triathlete, he was like 800 to 1,000 calorie deficit. So in your mind, like what's a quote unquote healthy deficit if somebody
we usually try and start around 500 calories, but we also make sure that we're fueling the workouts really, really well. That's where another area where I see athletes, they'll be like halfway through their long ride, or, maybe they're like 45 minutes till the end of their workout and they're like, I'm supposed to fuel, but maybe if I just didn't, I'd save myself those calories. That is the wrong mindset to be in. Like, I want people to just embrace the carbs for their workout. Like yesterday, like I took in, I was like, I probably don't need all these gels, but I really just mentally need myself to get in as much fuel because I really want to nail every single workout that I do. And so I embrace those carbs. And then I can look elsewhere in my day, in my meals and snacks, to make sure that I'm getting, like extra veggies and extra protein. And like I'm still having carbs at my meal, but I'm also getting in all that other extra nutrition. And that's where I want to see those body comp changes is through fueling my workouts well, getting stronger and fitter through them, but then optimizing that recovery nutrition and working on, getting leaner that way.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I think a lot of people, the workout portion of our day is such a small piece of it. Mm-hmm. And so if you do nothing but carbs in that area, like it's not going to change the entire day. But I think so many people get hyper focused on it, like, oh, I'm going to cut back on fuel right now. And then, but you probably end up making up for it later in the day.
Exactly. Yeah. It comes back and bites you in the butt for sure. Yeah. If you don't fuel your workout well. And if you think about it, you take in those carbs are going straight to your muscles to get used as energy. It's not like you're having this insulin response and your body's like storing the carbs for later. It's like, no, I'm going to prioritize that fuel right now and use it. So then you can really come out of that workout feeling good. And when you come out of a workout feeling like that was a really hard workout, but I feel great, that is such a confidence booster for people. Like if you finish a workout and you feel like death, like, you could think like, oh, this is a really good workout. I feel horrible, but like, it's not going to make you want to keep going. Like if you're feeling great after every single workout, you're going to want to go harder and stronger next time. You're going to feel actually ready for your race instead of like, oh, I don't feel like I trained well enough. Like that's where, I like to really work on that like mental piece of it as well. And, just today I use an AI based, I use Trainer Road right now for my cycling training. And so I just had my FTP updated and it went up 5% over the past month. And like such a motivator, but I'm like, this is totally the carbs that are helping me get through all of this training because, and I have only missed one workout, and that's because I had a migraine earlier this week. Otherwise, I've felt great every single workout. I've nailed all of them, and I attribute all of that to carbs.
And I think that's another great point in that, again, athletes, we kind of look at things in a vacuum a lot of time, but it's like really, it's the work that you're doing every week, every day that leads to the progress and leads to the change. And so by recovering well, fueling well, you're able to do that work week in and week out. And so I think that's a super important piece for people to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you've been trying to lose weight, but you've noticed that your workout performances have suffered, then there's things that we can look at nutritionally to really see the best of both worlds there.
Yeah. And so you touched on fueling workouts a little bit. So will you just tell us like what that should look like kind of before, during, and after?
Yes. So before a workout, ideally you would have some sort of carbs. The longer the workout is, the more carbs I would try and have beforehand. But if timing is an issue, like I said, like that, those early morning workouts where you're not going to get up and try and eat like 80 grams of carb before, an hour before your 5 a.m. start time. Like I get that. So that's where you would need to kind of adjust things and take in a little bit more during. And I would say vice versa. If you are someone that isn't great yet about taking fuel during your workouts, then I would up how much you're taking beforehand. I like to use myself as an example here. So I did a trail run the end of September. I had just started back to running at the end of July. So I wasn't quite where I needed to be in terms of like my intra training fueling. So during that 9.5 mile trail run, I only took like a couple gels in, and I probably should have taken like double of that. But prior to the race, because I got up early, I probably got up at 5 a.m. I had a 2-hour drive to get to the race. Between the time I woke up to the time that the race started, I had about 167 grams of carb. I hadn't realized how much I had until afterwards. I had added it all up. I'm like, oh, sure, it was a lot of fuel that I took in. But honestly, it was my saving grace throughout the race because I didn't take enough gels. And then it was about 20 minutes after the race where I was like, oh, I'm hungry. So I just barely made it, but I was really glad I took in all those carbs beforehand because it really got me through the race while I was like fully loaded, ready to go, and then just kind of maintained with those couple gels. But ideally, I would have fueled well during that race as well. So embrace the carbs beforehand because it really sets you up well in sparing some of that glycogen stores in your muscles so that you can get through that workout without hitting a wall, feeling that like wall of fatigue. But then during training or races, it really is up to duration is probably the number one factor in terms of influencing how much you should be taking in. So if you're doing a workout, if it's under 75 minutes, anywhere from like 0 to 30 grams of carb would be the recommendation. If it's a harder workout, you certainly can take more. Okay. I certainly did yesterday in my hour workout, but I just was feeling like I probably didn't have enough carbs earlier on that day. So I took in a lot more carbs than I probably, and then the recommendations are, but I was really glad I did. Yeah. And then 75 minutes to 2.5 hours, looking at anywhere from 30 to 60 grams of carb. And then that 2.5 hour mark, anything above that, we're looking at 60 to 90 plus grams of carb. We're seeing athletes now go above that 90 gram of carb per hour. We're seeing up to 120, some go even beyond that. I've even heard a rumor that there are Tour de France riders during specific parts of the tour that are taking like 200 grams of carb an hour. So it all has to come down to gut tolerance though. So if you're thinking, oh God, I could never take that much fuel, these athletes have worked their way up in terms of their gut being able to handle and tolerate that, and being able to digest and absorb that without having the GI consequences of it. And so, while you might only right now be taking 30 grams of carb an hour, you can work on building that up. It will take some time and it takes some diligence, but it is very doable, and it is a game changer for people. I had a runner a couple of years ago who, had been running for decades. And it was about like 3-4 months into coaching her. And finally I'm like, will you just humor me and do like 70 grams of carb an hour for the 16-mile run you have coming up? And she's like, oh, fine. That just seems like a lot. And I'm like, just humor me. Okay. And she messaged me after that run and she was like, oh my God, Alex, I have never felt so great finishing such a long run before. She goes, I feel amazing. I don't feel ravenously hungry. I feel like I could have gone farther. I could have she's like, I'm a believer now. I get what you're saying. She goes, I feel so much better. And so after that, it was very easy to convince her to fuel with more carbs, but you just have to kind of trust the process of building that gut tolerance. And then, your longer workouts feel so much better.
So I recently, and maybe it wasn't a recent post from you, but I saw one of your posts on Instagram where you said that you were kind of hanging on for dear life at the end of your first Ironman. And then you realized after the fact, I should have been taking 90 grams of carbs. So are you taking higher levels? I thought I had heard in the past that women struggle to get kind of above 60, but it sounds like that's not your experience. And then like in working up to that, what is the balance with athletes trying it in training, like doing the 90 grams per hour in training so that they are prepared for it on race day? Because I think a lot of athletes just don't do it in training, and then they get to the race and they're trying to take on 90 grams of carbs and they've got the GI distress about 5 hours in.
Yeah. So my Ironman was 10 years ago. And what we knew about endurance nutrition back then is not what we know now, right? Like we have really embraced the carbs now. And so as I look back 10 years ago when I was fueling, I fueled that race I had Honey Stinger Chews. I had just regular Gatorade in my bottles. I had, I really liked soft-boiled potatoes, like salted soft-boiled potatoes. So I brought some of them on the bike because I needed like something salty. What else did I used Honey Stinger waffles too. And so I just didn't fuel enough, but at that time I fueled adequately for what we knew, right? And now the recommendations are much higher. And so my plan for my racing next year is to for sure be at 90 an hour. And that would be through like hydration mixes on the bike. I'm a really big fan of like those carb-rich hydration mixes on the bike because you're already having to drink fairly frequently. So you get a little bit steadier source of energy just through drinking your bottles and then, or from your hydration packs, whatever you're using. And then supplementing with some higher carb gels that are like 40, 50 grams of gels. It's just a nice way to I can tend to tolerate like a little bit larger volumes of carbs at once. And that's my plan for next year because it's been a while since I've really been like out riding the bike a lot. So I'm a little worried about like bike handling and taking gels. So those higher carb gels where I don't have to take one every 20 minutes was actually my thought just this morning when I was driving home from dropping the kids off. I was like, okay, how am I going to do this next year? Actually riding a bike versus, because it's so easy on the bike trainer because my gels just sit there on my little desk next to my computer as I watch Netflix. Like it's just so easy. And I'm like, okay, I really got to think about like bike handling skills when it comes spring and I can get out and actually ride. I got to practice being comfortable, grabbing my gels, opening them up, taking them, and starting that all over again. Because that's another aspect of when you ride the trainer all the time, you don't actually get to practice that a whole bunch. And back to your point of like for women not fueling enough, I think it's men and women that they just don't prioritize it enough during training. And not only does it help your training to continue to like get better and better when you fuel them really well, but also it becomes second nature because you've practiced it so much. So then when you get to race day and there's so much going on, you're like trying to focus on performing and like, okay, what's my watts or what's my pace or like, how, like, what's my traffic like? I'm not drafting or am I drafting? Like there's so much that's going on in your head. I want the fueling and the hydration part to be like automatic. Right. So you're not having to be like, oh shoot, I missed my fueling time by like 10, 15 minutes and now I'm behind and I don't feel good. And like there's missed opportunity there. So I think that it's not just about fueling the workouts really well. It's also about having it be second nature so that you nail it on race day and feel really great.
Okay. And so just real quick, like, another note on that, like, so let's say I am trying to lose weight in my winter kind of base season. I'm riding the trainer, but I'm also trying to train my gut so I can handle more carbs by the time I'm racing in May and June. So would you still work on that on the trainer, like kind of like we were talking about, and then like work on the calorie reduction later in the day, lunch, dinner, things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I would optimize nutrition. Like I would focus on the body comp changes in terms of make sure you're getting adequate protein. We could make sure you're at that slight calorie deficit, but then we're fueling the workouts well. So we're not seeing performance decline throughout this body comp process. Yeah. That's where I would kind of, refine things so that we see them, like I said, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And then after the workout, what should that look like as far as setting ourselves up to recover from what we just did and set ourselves up for success for tomorrow?
Yeah. So that recovery process, you want to start as soon as possible. A lot of people don't feel super hungry after a workout. That's pretty common. Exercise will suppress our appetite naturally. And so you really have to be intentional about like, okay, I'm not super hungry, but I know I need to refuel because I got another hard workout tomorrow. And so carbs and protein and rehydration are the three things that I look for. Like, let's get, you rehydrated again, replenish electrolytes, and then some sort of carbs and some sort of protein. So if you can get in like 20 grams of protein, get in, some carbs as well to kind of start reloading those glycogen stores. Our body is very primed for recovery right afterwards. And so that's where we can really help you bounce back quicker from that workout to get that stress response lowered. Because anytime that our body is stressed, it's really hard to lose weight. So if we can really optimize lowering that stress and inflammation, it makes the body comp changes much easier to happen. So those are the three things: rehydration, carbs, protein. If you can get some sort of snack within, I'd say like 30 to 45 minutes would be great. But if you're already due to have a meal, then I would try and have a meal. And if you're really, really not hungry, you can do some sort of like liquid-based nutrition, like a smoothie or some sort of recovery drink. Just some of those recovery drinks, they'll have protein in there. They just don't have a ton of carbs. You might have to pair like a banana or some crackers or something with it just to make sure you're getting some carbs with it too. Because if you don't have the carbs and you just have protein, your body will kind of just use that protein as energy and not actually for what we want it to be used for. So you need to have both. They're both very important.
Okay. So chocolate milk used to be my big go-to. And it's like around that time that like 2014, 2012, like there was a big campaign by Milk to promote that, but it like kind of fell off to the wayside. Is that still a good
still
option?
An excellent option. It's got a great carb and protein ratio there. It's got electrolytes in it. It's going to rehydrate you. So it's kind of like everything built all in one drink. And usually it tastes pretty good for most people post-workout. So you can get that down. I really love the Fairlife chocolate milk. It's so good, but it's a little bit lower in carbs. So I do usually recommend pairing it with like a banana or something like that. But if you never tried Fairlife chocolate milk, it is delicious. Like I've had quite a few families that are like, oh my gosh, it's now our favorite thing in our fridge. I'm like, yeah, it's the best. So
now I've never seen it. I'll have to check. See if I can find
yes. In the States, it's pretty much everywhere and it's delicious. Core Power is also made from the same company as well.
Okay.
But Fairlife is just more of a regular milk and it's so good. I can't speak enough good things about it. It's delicious.
Awesome. So are there any special considerations for people that are trying to optimize their body composition, like as they get older, or are there differences between the sexes and how they should focus on it?
Yeah. So as we age, and I just saw this statistic from a study recently that starting at age 30, it's pretty common to see anywhere from 3 to 8% of muscle mass loss every decade. And then that accelerates quite a bit once you hit age 60. So I think as early as you can start prioritizing doing including some strength training. I know when we're cardio junkies, it's really hard to like prioritize that, but it is so important for body composition to maintain that muscle mass, and then looking at that protein, getting it enough to at least see muscle maintenance, if not putting on some muscle. So as we age, that really can be imperative for like longevity in the sport. And age is just a number. We have some incredible athletes out there that are in that like 50 to 55, 55 to 60 age group that are just killing it. So, don't let age deter you, because there are some really great athletes, even, as they get older. So as long as you can prioritize nutrition, you can really keep the injuries at bay, keep that muscle mass maintained, if not increased. Those are the two main things that I look at. I also find with hydration, sometimes our thirst mechanism can get muted as we age, so people don't feel as thirsty. And so it's important to make sure you understand your sweat rate and get in a really good practice of staying hydrated. I've seen some older athletes that have said like, oh, I would love to do another Ironman, but every time I do, I can never finish it because I just get too dehydrated. I'm like, all right, yeah, well, we really got to work on like that hydration routine and make sure your body's comfortable and confident enough to take in the needed hydration to keep yourself from heading into the med tent because of dehydration.
Yeah. So are there some general products you recommend? Like, do you have some that you like more than others as far as hydration?
As far as like electrolyte drinks?
Yeah, exactly.
I think all of them can kind of work. It also will just depend on people's sweat rate too, and how salty their sweat is. Some athletes, when you look at them, like towards the end of the race, they're just like covered in white, dried salt all over them. And I'm like, oh, you're going to need a little bit higher electrolyte product than some of the others. And then some people just don't lose as much salt in their sweat. So getting to know like your own unique needs in terms of, like how salty your sweat is, how much are you losing through sweat, and then practicing in your training so that, again, when you get to race day, because this always happens with athletes, they will hardly make hydration a priority, and then they get to the race day and they have an aid station every 2 miles of their marathon or their run portion of the race, and then they're like chugging water, and the next thing you know, they're dealing with that like sloshy like feeling in their stomach, and they're feeling kind of nauseous. And I'm like, well, yeah, your body's not used to that. And they've actually done studies where they had athletes train with higher volumes of fluid, like consuming it throughout their workout. And after like 6 or 7 days, that feeling of sloshiness significantly decreased. So our body's very adaptable in that. So you really, when I say like practice your nutrition and hydration, like I'm not just making that up. I'm like, no, there's actually like research that shows your body can adapt to it. Your body will tolerate it better. So then you don't have to worry about those side effects happening on race day.
Yeah. And then, so you touched a little bit on older athletes. What about the differences between male and females and how they might approach body comp changes?
Yeah. With women, when they're going through kind of that menopause phase, sometimes we notice that body comp can be a little bit slower, but I think it's still doable. In our experience, we've had quite a few women in their late 40s, 50s, even early 60s that have still seen success. It just comes down to really kind of finding what works for them in their schedule and creating like those sustainable long-term habits.
Okay. And then as far as kind of practical takeaways here, what would you tell the listeners when they're interested in getting started down this path? What would you kind of tell them?
Yeah. I would say that it's going to take time to see results. Like you can't just expect after like a week to start seeing like instant like success. You know what I mean? Like it really has to be working on the consistency and the long-term like sustainability of it in order to truly see like the lasting results. Like if you're looking for just like quick fixes, you're going to be disappointed because with body comp changes, it has to be kind of a slow, gradual process. You have to be very patient. And I know that can be really frustrating, but most people don't like gain a whole bunch of weight overnight. It's usually a really like sneaky, gradual process. And same thing. And that's kind of how it's got to be. It's got to be this gradual process to get back down to that goal body comp. And so be patient. Focus on consistency, make sure it's doable and enjoyable. Because if you're hating how you eat, that's not how we want to go about it. So, yeah. And when people are like bouncing all over with different diets and tactics, like nothing's ever going to work because you're never actually giving it a chance to work. So be patient, stick with it. And then if you're really just frustrated, then work with a dietitian. Like that's what our job is to help athletes feel their best and do it in the healthiest way possible.
Awesome. And on that note, where can people find you?
Yeah, I am at alexlarsonnutrition.com. If you're on social channels, I'm at Alex Larson Nutrition. I've got a one-on-one program. That's our main program. And so we personalize our nutrition advice specifically to the athlete. And then I've also got some free resources on there. I've got a blog. I'm starting a podcast here at the beginning of 2025 to have some really personalized endurance nutrition information there. Very nice. And yeah, my goal is really to create a world of well-fueled endurance athletes. And so slowly making progress over here.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. I know I learned quite a bit, and I'm sure the listeners did too.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Take care.